All right, let's go on to the next event or the next situation and circumstance that the tortoise system has to be able to deal with. A hospital cancels an organ request. You recall over here that a hospital requested the organ. Here we're going to cancel that request. So again, first thing we do is draw the bubble representing the process. Don't give it a name, don't label it. And we ask the very first question, and that is, how do I know, or how do we know that a hospital cancels an organ request? Well, I'm going to put the hospital here again. This is the real hospital. And I'm going to have a data flow coming from the hospital. It doesn't matter how we get this information. It doesn't matter about the technology that's used to submit that information. The fact is, we get it from the hospital. And I'm going to put request canceled from the hospital. So what we have to do now is to find the organ request that they originally submitted. So we have to identify the organ request, and I'm going to query against that organ request to see if I can find it. And I'm going to make that also into a query and response in this case. So I'm going to query the data. I'm going to query my list of organ requests or my database of organ requests, and I'm going to get a response back. But I only want to look at the organ requests that are specific to the hospital that requests it. So I have to, again, have my record of member hospitals. I have to find the hospital that canceled it, and we have to find the organ requests that are specific to that hospital. So I have to find those requests that are joined to the hospital that requested the cancellation. And by finding the request, I can then, and I'm just going to put cancel here. I'm going to put a data flow that says cancel that request. But I also have to look at the data item that represents that, because what's the data that tells us it's been canceled? So I'm going to put date and time canceled. Date and time canceled. So I'll keep track of when it was canceled. Now, you might want to get into control stuff such as who authorized it and so forth, but I'm sort of hesitant in getting into control stuff at this point in time. I think a lot of that should be left up to the solution designers, the architects, because they should be looking at all the controls when they look at the technology that's been used. But, you know, not a lot of harm if you do include that, but I'm just going to keep track of the date and time canceled. And I'm going to tell the hospital that the request has been canceled. Do I want to keep track of the fact that I've told them? Remember that the third question always is, what do we want to remember about what we've done? Well, we want to remember that we canceled it, so I have the date and time canceled here. But do we also want to remember that we told the hospital that we canceled it? And I suspect we want to do that. We want to keep these, it's a bit of a control, it's an audit trail if you like. And I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to put date and time, hospital advised of cancellation. I'm going to put that in there. So I'm not only going to cancel, but I'm also going to record the fact that I've told the hospital as well. So what am I canceling? I'm canceling the request. Remember that the first rule of attributing business data is to attribute the data item to the object it best describes. Well, the date and time that the hospital was advised of the cancellation doesn't describe the hospital, so I'm not going to attribute it there. It describes the organ request. That's what we're talking about. It's a specific request. Therefore, I'm going to remember that I told them about that request. Now, that seems to be all there's to it. We get the request. We find the hospital that made the request. We find the organ request from that hospital. We cancel it. We remember that we canceled it. We tell the hospital we canceled it. And we remember that we told the hospital about that. Okay, so there's our narrative. Just as I spoke it now, somebody can just key that in, somebody can write that up. That becomes a narrative. It becomes a narrative of receive a request to cancel, find the hospital that made the request, find the request that they're canceling, cancel the request, tell the hospital we've canceled the request, and remember that we have told the hospital of the cancellation. That becomes a narrative. Now, once we're done, we write it up exactly the way I said it, or the way you would say it when you're doing the work, and I'm going to give it a name. And again, strong verb-noun construct. From the inside, what are we doing? From the inside, looking out. What we're doing is we're canceling the request. So I'm going to call it cancel request. And as far as the diagram goes, we now have some data flows, we have some pictures to support a hospital cancel as an organ request. We have a narrative, we have some objects that are participating in this process. We have some new data attributes as well as we go along. And that's really, and the narrative, of course, and that's really all there's to it. 90% of this, remember, is very straightforward because you're not trying to figure out how it's done. That's the complicated part. This part here, once you're used to it, is very, very straightforward. But like anything else, you have to get used to it. You have to practice some more, and then practice some more again. And that'll be very straightforward. So we're going to go on to now to the business rules table for this process.